The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sara Payan podcast. I'm Sara Payan, your host, and today we are broadcasting live from the Beautiful Woods Dispensary in West Hollywood. And sitting with me here today is Scott Schmidt, the Executive Director of Emerald Village WeHo, and Stephen Post from the Last Prisoner Project. Thank you both so much for joining me today. I am so excited to be here and be here with you.
Oh, well, thanks for coming down to West Hollywood, visiting a beautiful space like the Woods Lounge. We're out here. We got a koi pond and parrots flying around, and it's a beautiful afternoon here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and in a beautiful air-conditioned cabana, no less.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah, and thank you for having us on. Really just excited to learn more about what we can do to raise awareness for the folks that are still behind bars for cannabis, and talk a little bit about the mission there and how that overlaps, especially with in this month of Pride, the LGBTQ rights movement, and really how history has always been intertwined between the two movements.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much intersectionality around that. And I think it's a very important conversation to have. Being that I cut my teeth in the Castro and I am a San Franciscan, I took for granted the fact that most people would understand the inherent queerness of cannabis in the history. But we have a lot of educating for people to do, because if it was not for these people, we would not have this industry or movement. And it's a really important thing to bring up. I know we're talking during Pride Month, but as we were talking before we were recording, we need to get over this performative stuff and remember that Pride is every day. And let's have those conversations.
Yeah, no, I think during this month of Pride, it's really important to highlight it. I think it brings the public attention to it, as we spoke about, even though maybe mainstream media and especially even in the cannabis space, folks might only be focusing on it during this month. I know here at Last Prisoner Project, we are really trying to highlight it throughout the year. We have a current campaign called Loud and Proud. We're actually working with the folks over at Culture Machine and Justin Simeon. He did Dear White People. And they're really great about really tracing the smoke back to its source, and just really highlighting the history that's been in plain sight and that folks don't like to pay attention to necessarily. I know I've been in the space over 5 or 6 years now, and the Cannabro is real. You come across
Yes.
them like it's something that not everyone can bring attention to. And so getting to work with folks like Laganja, Georges, our Queen of the Emerald Village, Saviana, folks like Scott, and tons of other cannabis activists like Michelina Balaina and Solange Burnett. They're all really raising their voices in this Loud and Proud campaign. And so definitely encourage folks to check that out on our Instagram. It's kind of a docuseries style coming out every Friday on Culture Machine and Last Prisoner Project.
Oh, that is very cool. I love that. Yeah, those are really, really important conversations to have. I know, like, in the Castro, we had a lot of people that I worked in retail for many years. So I was really fortunate enough to spend time with people like Cleve Jones, Armistead Maupin, just Ken Jones, rest his soul. Just people who are so very impactful with the movement. And it takes all of us to keep the conversation going and to also really honor and uplift the messages of our elders as well.
No, we're becoming those very quickly.
No kidding, right?
And so, I've called West Hollywood the home of legal cannabis, or the birthplace of legal cannabis, and people in San Francisco get mad at me because, medical cannabis, I will give full credit, started in San Francisco with Brandy Mary and with Dennis. And Dennis Perone. But it was actually West Hollywood that took the first step to solemnize medical cannabis into our municipal code, created an ordinance and a regulatory framework for having cannabis dispensaries and medical dispensary collectives. So, San Francisco started it. We actually made it legal and real and kind of a construct that kind of has set the idea. If you have a medical dispensary anywhere in the world, you owe it to the people of San Francisco and West Hollywood, specifically the Castro and Boys Town here in WeHo. We got it started and we're keeping it going. And it goes back to those roots, early days during AIDS. And as we are looking at, as Generation X gets into retirement age,
don't say that.
We're looking at having that entire generation of folks who survives through the AIDS crisis and were here during the 80s. The survivors we're going to be losing those in the next decade or 2 and 3. And it's really important that we solemnize all that and look back at what a legacy has come out of it. And even through those darkest days, good things have come.
Yes.
And that those of us who got through it and made it through are building on that legacy and creating a legacy that's going to help people, not just here in California, but around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that people, well, maybe I should say people who are not immersed in the culture fail to understand is that the LGBTQ community has always been a flashpoint for activism and leading with love and action and community.
Well, because we got to, because no one else is. no one else is standing for us.
If you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
This is the 10-year anniversary this year of the Obergefell ruling, which granted marriage equality nationwide in the U.S. And I look at where cannabis is with legalization, with having almost 40 medical states and, more than a majority of recreational states. And then if you count hemp and the the intoxicating hemp products that you can buy in Florida and Texas and wherever, we're really beyond the point where gay marriage equality was when the Supreme Court said, this is ridiculous, just make it legal nationwide. So I think we're going to be at that precipice soon where, we will see that breakthrough. But we're following that same path with cannabis, but we're about 10 to 15 years behind.
Emerald Village, West Hollywood, the heart of cannabis culture in Los Angeles. From the first legalized dispensaries to the nation's first cannabis cafe, WeHo leads the way. Visit legacy spots like AHHS, LAPCG, and MedMen. The fresh vibes at Calma, Urban Leaf, and Green Queen. Chill at lounges like The Artistry, OG Cannabis Cafe, Off the Charts, Pleasure Med, and The Woods. Emerald Village WeHo, the world's 5-star cannabis destination. Your elevated escape awaits. Yeah, well, I think that this community always leads the way. Whether it's rights for people, human rights in general, whether we're talking about cannabis policy, or, hey, let's just be real. When we talk about like being tastemakers and fashion and music and everything, it's something that can't be ignored. And I think that it's a real example for everybody else, how to show up in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's super important. Before we get into more of that, though, because Stephen, it's your first time on the show, I always like to ask my guests, what was your first cannabis experience?
I love talking about this. I talked about it on a gay podcast previously over with the folks at Puff Creative. And
we love John.
Yes. And I was talking about it. It was my freshman going into sophomore year of high school. The stereotypical apple bowl was in use. It was in the back seat with 3 of my other friends, had one senior who brought the weed. And so it was a very interesting experience. I feel like that was the gateway. I have an older brother who really introduced me further to it. I never knew what the smell was for those first early years. I was like, why does his room always reek like that? And we are definitely the closest now. And he grows his own at home and things. And so he's really been a guide for me, even in my own cannabis journey. And so that was back in Ohio. Luckily, our state has now legalized back in 2023. And when I went back home for Christmas this last time was the first time I could actually buy in a legal dispensary. And so I think, as Scott said, it just shows to show the progress that has been made, even in a conservative state like Ohio, that there really is an acceptance there. Obviously, there's still pushback. There's been a number of states that have tried to recriminalize. Even in Ohio, through the legislature, they were trying to change those laws. And I think other places like Idaho have imposed a new fine of over $300 just for possession. And so I think the thing is what we see at Last Prisoner Project, there's still a need for re-education. I know we were talking about the older generations rolling off, and I think it's really important to be informing newer generations, like my folks. I consider myself a zillennial, not quite a Gen Zer, but I think it's really important that we continue to definitely provide that history, because it's important to know how far we went, the hurdles we've had to overcome to get to where we're at. And so one of the biggest things for us that's still the blatant injustice is folks that are behind bars for cannabis. And so we know there's over 30,000 folks across at the state level and over 3,000 folks at the federal level still incarcerated. And so those are the folks that we really need to continue fighting for as we continue to progress at all different state levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we're getting to legalization, people are just assuming that people are automatically being let out of jail. Mm-hmm. And we know that that's not the fact, especially at the federal level. How many times have we heard right at the end of a presidency that there's going to be clemency for people? Mm-hmm. They're excited about it, and then they end up stuck.
Right. It's been a drop in the bucket. You know what I mean? We were able to get 15 of our constituents granted clemency at the end of the Biden administration, which we're very happy for those folks that they're now reunited with their families. But we have over 350 other constituents that also have applications that we have not seen get any attention. And so it's something even our current president changed his tune on a little bit in the past election. And we're looking forward to working with the pardon czar, Alice Johnson, to get some of those cases uplifted. And I think everybody's in agreement that these are things that need to change. But so far, it's only been at a case-by-case level. And really, we need something bigger, something at the federal level, a bigger piece of legislation that, whether it be safe banking or some of these other pieces like the Prepare Act or pieces that have started to think about the regulation of cannabis, we need to ensure that there is a mechanism like resentencing and record clearance embedded in those pieces, or else what are we doing? Because we just believe legalization without decriminalization is not justice.
No, it's a slap in the face if people are making money.
Yeah, we went through this with Don't Ask, Don't Tell on gays in the military when, there was a lawsuit out in Palm Springs. Had a nationwide injunction that was stayed, banning basically overturning Don't Ask, Don't Tell, banning the ban on gays and lesbians in the military. And eventually, a bill was passed before the court injunction kicked in. And we legalized service regardless of sexual orientation. But what we didn't do was go back and restore retirement benefits and everything for all the folks who were kicked out of the military. So, there's lots of parallels between what we've been through with gay legalization or liberation and cannabis legalization going forward. And to your point about people with convictions, it's not just Americans that are facing challenges because of past cannabis use. If you ever were arrested for using or selling cannabis in Europe or anywhere outside of the U.S. and you want to visit the U.S., you could be denied a visa.
Right.
And so, that really makes it a challenge because people want to experience the best cannabis in the world, which is only available in California, and they can't because they can't get into the States.
Yeah, it's a huge disconnect. It's like, we have states that allow it. Why can't people come in? It's not like they're going to be hustling something into the country. We already have the best cannabis around, especially where we are. A question: with the new pardon czar and her history, how hopeful are you that there will be change created?
I think we are hopeful. She obviously has her own criminal history and has really overcome that. And I think has been a champion for second chances. I believe we have the channels and has created the mechanisms to uplift community voices and really figure out who are these folks that really should not be in prison anymore. Folks that are doing the same exact things that our dispensaries and even MSOs are doing across the country at much larger scales than these folks ever were doing themselves. And so there is hope. We definitely have to continue to put pressure on that administration. We'll definitely be doing that through the legislative vehicles. And we do have some strong champions of bipartisan in the cannabis caucus, like Rep. Ilhan Omar and David Joyce. So we're very excited to continue to be working with those offices and making sure that we can get something together on the legislative side, because truly with the stalling of rescheduling as well, without some type of legislative action, I don't foresee something impacting the actual legal and criminal regulations that would be required to change to actually release these folks and clear these records.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually having Rep. Omar on week after next.
Oh, how
so I'm
exciting.
really excited to have that conversation with her. I think, when we look at this, it's an interesting thing because this whole thing with cannabis is a study in critical thought. Because not all things that are illegal are wrong, and not all things that are legal are good, right? So we're looking at, like, when I was co-chair of the legalization task force for San Francisco, we were talking about 64 was going to be on the ballot. And people were talking about the traditional or illicit market. And they were like, well, what do we do with that? I'm like, well, you lower the barrier to entry. People want to participate in a legal market. I mean, yes, we have some thrill seekers out there, but by and large, people don't like looking over their shoulders. And we're criminalizing people that, if they were working in the legal market, would be amazing entrepreneurs, craft cultivators. These are brilliant, talented people that should be able to work in a legal industry. There's a huge disconnect with that, especially in California.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was just going to say, when Scott was talking about the international impacts as well, it brought up just meeting the moment we're at now. I don't know if you saw the story about how the National Guard troops in LA that were deployed here were actually used in the Monterey County marijuana raids that arrested between 70 to 75 undocumented immigrants. And so for me, as a public safety commissioner for the city of West Hollywood that's been evaluating resources, we don't necessarily oversee those things, more so the sheriff, the fire department. And we've been very grateful for their support and some of what they've done in the immediate moment. But I don't think those resources from the National Guard should be being used to be arresting folks that are doing cannabis activity that other folks legally are doing. And so I think there's so many intersections right now around cannabis, around policies that need to change. And again, the LGBTQ movement is just one of those overlaps. And so I think it's really important to continue to highlight the folks that are on the front lines trying to push those policies and change those things, because we're embedded into all of these efforts. Yeah,
absolutely. From a public safety standpoint, what are the conversations around cannabis consumption here in WeHo? I mean, a lot of the reports that have come back, the research has shown that when cannabis is legalized, we're actually having less incidences from a public safety perspective, especially because alcohol use is going down. I mean, I always like to say no one smokes a joint and goes home and beats their kids.
It's difficult to quantify the impacts. Our lounges in some degree serve as a diversion strategy to keep people from public consumption. Because people talk about going to San Francisco and it reeks of weed, and
New York too.
In New York, and they've got the poop maps and all that. And here in West Hollywood we have 7 lounges for 36,000 people. You look here at the Woods, it's a Friday at noon, and there's people that are just sitting around doing their work and enjoying cannabis. And so in many ways, it's a diversion strategy to get rid of those, negative odor impacts that people often complain about. What we have seen since our first lounge opened in 2019 is that the number of DUIs in West Hollywood have declined. I can't tell you that that's because of the lounges, because there were other things that have happened between now and then. We had COVID, right? And everything was closed. So yes, there were fewer DUIs in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, but we haven't seen DUIs go back up to the pre-COVID levels. And so it's possible that having cannabis lounges and having access to legal cannabis in West Hollywood has contributed to that. I'm not going to say that correlation equals causation, but you can infer what you want.
Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, even without having those exact details, there's a sense, and I think the leadership of the city has done this very well, of just embracing cannabis. and making sure that we do have these beautiful lounges and making sure that people feel safe coming to them and leaving. And I think it's really important for us to make sure that that environment is something that's promoted, and that alone makes you feel safer as a consumer. I'm not having that feeling of looking over my shoulder as much, and even coming from someplace in Ohio, like I said, where even though it is now legal, the environment, the culture around it is not there. And so I think creating a space that West Hollywood has created around feeling comfortable to consume and having it be a social space, it's always been that social tool and something to create joy in moments that we've faced oppression, especially in the LGBTQ community. And I think WeHo, again, as the overlap between a very LGBTQ plus supportive city and now a very cannabis positive city, I think those things have created environments where I know I've met people I don't think I would have ever met. And I think there's just this stronger sense of community woven into the fabric that makes me feel like I never want to leave and go back to a different environment like Ohio, honestly.
Yeah, no, I feel that being from the Midwest. I'm like, yeah, I like our weird little world in California where everyone's accepted. Humboldt Family Farms is rooted in the legendary hills of Northern California, where cannabis isn't just grown, it's lived. As one of the top sun-grown cannabis brands in the state, Humboldt Family Farms represent a collective of multi-generational family-run farms deeply committed to sustainable practices, environmental stewardship, and the craft of cultivation. Every harvest reflects decades of knowledge and a deep respect for the land, the plant, and the people who enjoy it. Now, they're partnering with Surfer Magazine and Embark for a first-of-its-kind collaboration, the first time in Surfer's 65-year history that they've ever partnered with a cannabis brand. The drop includes Humboldt Family Farms' iconic Maui Wowie flower and Hawaiian Fanta pre-rolls. You'll find the collab exclusively at Embark locations across California, and a limited number are dropping as part of Embark's weekly Getaway Bag series, a fresh tote every Friday packed with California's best cannabis. And it sells out every time. Embark has earned its place as California's most trusted cannabis dispensary, but they're not just selling cannabis. They're creating experiences that connect people to the plant and proving that it can be a force for good. They're pioneering what normalization looks like, bringing legal sales and consumption to places no one thought possible, like the California State Fair and Cali Roots. This summer, they'll do it again at Dead & Company's 60th anniversary in Golden Gate Park, followed by their 5th year at Outside Lands, with Humboldt Family Farms right alongside them. Every Embark location gives back 1% of sales to its local community, helping fund youth drug prevention programs and logging thousands of volunteer hours across California. A collaboration like this with Surfer Magazine and Humboldt Family Farms is an extension of this mission. It proves that cannabis can exist in mainstream culture, that it belongs in iconic spaces alongside one of the most demanding sports in the world. This is what progress looks like. For more information, visit Humboldt Family Farms at HumboldtFamilyFarms.com, Embark at GoEmbark.com, and Surfer Magazine at Surfer.com. Almost.
But I do think,
we're
Stephen,
working on it.
We talk a little bit about urban design, and I think when many people around the U.S. think of a cannabis dispensary, they're thinking of a place with no windows and with metal bars, and it feels, even though it might be legal, it feels like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
When you go in. And
some people like that.
We all like the same
for different
thing,
folks, yeah.
Right? So what we've done in West Hollywood, we had this merit-based process, and these new businesses that have opened, whether we're talking about the Woods or Calma or the Artistry with these floor-to-ceiling windows, it looks like a normal retail experience. It looks like it could be a Christian Louboutin store, right? And you're going in there. It's just that the product they're selling is a plant instead of shoes. And it feels completely normal. And whether or not you are a cannabis consumer, advocate, whatever, if you're not, you drive by these spaces and your subconscious opinion about cannabis itself is going to change because it's just normal, right? It doesn't look shady. It doesn't look illegal. And those prejudices that maybe were put in your mind by government agencies or others over time go away because, those are just those are just people sitting in the back on a Friday afternoon doing work and chilling. And
Yeah.
We even saw today the LA County Public Health put out anti-cannabis messaging on their Twitter feed. Sorry to dead name an X. And talking about how if you do cannabis, it affects your short-term memory and your ability to focus. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe if you're having an indica, but if you have a sativa, it does help your ability to focus, right? And if you come out to places like, the Woods or the Artistry or the Off the Charts Lounge, any day, you're going to see people sitting on their laptops, doing work, smoking weed. So don't tell me LA County Public Health, all right? And that it has all these negative impacts.
Yeah, they obviously haven't heard of THCV
and having,
or CBG.
Right? Mm-hmm. And letting people come and just see what folks are able to do when they're consuming cannabis. And in fact, in many ways, it enhances creativity. And especially in Los Angeles, we rely on creative industries to succeed. And so, in many ways, and sorry, I've been going on.
No,
but,
please.
What we're doing with cannabis and changing that urban fabric is similar to what happened 25 years ago in West Hollywood with queer spaces. So just bear with me. At the time, we had railroad tracks that went down the middle of Santa Monica Boulevard, dating back to the 1920s, when we were in a town called Sherman, and the only gay bar in the country that had windows was Twin Peaks up in San Francisco.
That's one of my favorite bars, otherwise known as the Glass Coffin.
Yes, the Glass Coffin. Yes, in the mid 90s. And 1998, West Hollywood purchased Santa Monica Boulevard from Caltrans, because technically it is State Highway 2, also known as Route 66, the Mother Road. And we took over the street, we tore out the railroad tracks, we widened the sidewalks, and allowed the gay bars to have sidewalk cafe dining opportunities. And all of a sudden, gays were out having happy hour on the sidewalk. And 50,000 people a day were driving down Santa Monica Boulevard and seeing it. And all of those things that they used to imagine were happening behind those blackout windows weren't happening. And we were able to crush those stereotypes. And within a decade, we were able to get marriage equality in California. We were able to get, even Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Republican governor, was supporting gay marriage. All right. And so
he gets it
doesn't take long. And even just the things that we don't think about to change culture, we can have those conversations and having those conversations with folks coming out as a cannabis user. Harvey Milk told folks back, told gay people in the late 70s, come out wherever you are, because people aren't always aware that they have gay or lesbian folks in their lives. And once they are aware of that, they become more supportive. Well, with cannabis, come out as a cannabis user. Let people know, and let people know why. Let people know the benefits. Let people know, hey, I use indica. It helps me go to bed. It deals with anxiety. All of those things. Myrcene, and you can go into all the little cannabinoids and the different health impacts that they can benefit you with. Having those conversations with folks and being out there and being visible, it makes a huge difference. And that's how we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Conversation is normalization.
Yeah, and it just reminded me, I just wrote an op-ed maybe 2 years ago for the Washington Blade about we were heading to our Unity Week of Action, where we were with Rep. Omar and other folks pushing for change. And I talked about how I came out at a much earlier age. I was a freshman or sophomore, and thank you for the folks before me that allowed me to come out so early, because it has changed. But I felt like I wasn't able to come out as a cannabis user until Ohio had legalized in that most recent time, and I came home and used it. And I know the discouraging looks from my Catholic mother, my gosh, I didn't ever know I was going to get, but it was just such a different experience. And it almost felt harder to come out as a cannabis user in some ways because of the stigmatization around it, I felt. And so I think it's just so important to continue to create environments like West Hollywood is doing, so that those barriers are not only broken down for individuals, but for folks that might have already had those stigmatizations built into their education.
Yeah, absolutely. I did an episode the other year with Jim and Brian from the Bohemian Chemist, and Jim was mentioning that he felt that it was coming out of the closet a second time when he let people know that he was a grower and in the industry, and that it was almost harder.
Well, and sometimes it's the opposite. So having that CBD and hemp-based THC products in places like Texas, et cetera, where my parents live. So several years ago, they got a hybrid car, and their dog couldn't stand it when the engine switched over to the electric mode. And so they started getting vet CBD and giving it to the dog about 20 minutes before they ever had to go on the road. And it worked. And so, these conservative Christian parents in Texas, all of a sudden have no problem with cannabis because they saw the benefits and saw that it was safe. They were willing to give it to their own dog. And so the fact that now their son is working, to promote the best cannabis destination in the world, it doesn't faze them because they
I love
saw
that
the
plug,
benefits.
by the way.
Yeah. Come on, we're going to welcome in one of your next guests. He's on his way in here at the Woods, at the lounge. It's Jason Beck.
Hey,
We'll be hearing
Jason,
from
welcome.
soon. All right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that is true. I mean, I got into the industry after having cancer, and I had been in civil rights before that. And I was very worried about how my family would take it in some ways, but I'd already been through so much, quite honestly, I didn't give a shit. And then they were like, oh, well, she just survived cancer. I think they would have given me a hard time if I hadn't gone through that. But they were kind of like looking at it as almost my midlife crisis. And then they finally took it seriously, and there were more questions. But I mean, when we look at this, it's also a safe access issue. I mean, we're in this beautiful area here. We're not having conversations as much about the fact that people who live in Section 8 housing, if they get caught with cannabis, they can lose their homes. So having lounges where people can go and safely use cannabis is incredibly important, not just for the social aspect, but for people keeping themselves safe.
Definitely. And, after the fires in Los Angeles in January, West Hollywood made a conscious effort to open up our lounges and provide free access to anyone who had been displaced or might have been in FEMA housing. Because, when we're in that government sponsored housing, you can't consume on site, can't technically possess on site. So having safe places to go, like here in West Hollywood, does make a world of difference.
Yeah, it does. I know, like in San Francisco, there are a lot of people who live in the Presidio. You can't get delivery in the Presidio. And people are they're like, wait a minute, we have legalization in California. It's like on federal land. It's a whole different story.
Well, and I think that's where, we will get there. And I'm hopeful it'll be sooner than later. Because I was in the trenches during the gay marriage battles, fought it here in California, was part of the efforts in New York to get the first legislature to adopt marriage equality. And, it was a bipartisan effort. Mm-hmm. But it is, it's the baby steps in the gay liberation. We started with domestic partner registries, which simply were pieces of paper that, we got the West Hollywood City Hall or San Francisco City Hall that said, hey, these two people are in a relationship and, under our rent control laws, you can't kick them out. Or you could take that to the hospital just to verify for visitation rights if the hospital would acknowledge it. But it was kind of an official public piece of paper. That led to civil unions, which gave most of the benefits of marriage, but not marriage itself. And then eventually, enough states had adopted marriage equality that the Supreme Court said you've got to recognize, Texas has to recognize California marriages and vice versa. Because at the time in Texas, a transgender man could marry another man because Texas recognized your gender at birth. So all those things. In the same way, we look at how we've gone from medical to adult use. Adult use I kind of see as the civil unions of legalization, and descheduling, not rescheduling, will be when we hit that, equal rights, marriage equality ruling. I kind of think it's going to come from a, possibly an interstate commerce argument before the Supreme Court that having 50 different wholly vertically integrated industries makes it discriminatory on an interstate commerce perspective, that you can't buy California products in Nevada or Arizona. but there may be another angle that makes it happen. But I think it's going to happen soon. And it's going to happen by working across party lines.
It is. It's so important that we do that. And that's, I think, one of the things that our politicians need to get a little more clear on is we used to have much more working together across the aisle. We're at a very strange time in our politics. I had Michael Steele on a couple of times, and we were having conversations about this. And he said that if you knew how many people on both sides supported it, and we were having real conversations about it instead of fighting for the sake of fighting, this would be a done deal already.
Yeah, no, and I appreciated you bringing up the Section 8 housing piece as well, because I think outside of kind of the cannabis legalization space, a lot of the stuff that we're looking at is the criminal justice reform space. There's lots of bills around Second Chance Act, even the First Step Act that was initiated back in the Trump administration's first term, trying to use some of those vehicles to get some of our folks out. We have a number of folks who are on probation, parole, supervised release that couldn't enjoy a place like this, the Woods, and still can't purchase or are still very restricted. And so I think there's a lot of collateral consequences still from these convictions that I think as we're looking at policies for the cannabis space and making sure that we're trying to embed those criminal justice reform policies in there. We're also trying to work with folks that are working in the probation and reform space and some of these more criminal justice orgs, because I know that there's opportunities to provide more relief for the folks that are in there and possibly in a more optimistic avenue that might have a little bit more movement hopefully in the coming years.
And, if there has been, I think there's a debate as to whether there's been a grand realignment in American politics. The Republican Party isn't God, guns, and gays anymore, which is what it was for 30, 40 years, right? From Ronald Reagan up until the current president. They removed all the anti-gay stuff from the Republican Party platform last year. It didn't make it headlines, but that's gone. We've got Nancy Mace, who is one of the biggest advocates for cannabis in Congress. And her big disagreement with Chuck Schumer was whether the federal tax should be 3% or 25%. And those of us in California can tell you which one of those will be a market that survives and which one won't. Right? So we can't. If the cannabis community in the U.S. or in Europe tries to pigeonhole itself into one, left or right, it will fail. It will raise a lot of money and get people really excited, but it won't succeed in achieving the ultimate goal, which is legalization, decriminalization. If we want that, we've got to work across the lines. And that's how we did it with gay rights. That's how we did it with the gay marriage. It was a Republican Senate in New York that legalized marriage equality in New York. There were only 5 Republicans that voted for it. They got most of the Democrats, but there were still enough Democrats that were peeling off that we had to go into Staten Island and Long Island and pick off those suburban Republicans who, their wives had gay hairdressers or, they were police officers that, were some of their colleagues were gay that they worked with, but they put their lives on the line together. That's how we'll do it with cannabis.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that this political bifurcation is just really hard because it's dehumanizing for both sides. Mm-hmm. And my views have always been, I have certain views. And I will always work across the aisle with somebody who has different views than mine with our commonalities. And I think that really helps us work together. And, I think that a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now, just going back to it, is just very dehumanizing. And that's why we're not getting the work done that we need to.
Yeah. No, and it's hard. I do all of our communications. I pay way too much attention to the Instagram algorithm than I would like to, and trying to see what we can hit right. But I think those bifurcations are hard to get past and pull people together for. And so I think it's really important that we push forward and create moments where we can come together. That's what we tried to do with our Cannabis Unity Day of Action in DC, bringing folks from the left and the right together, working with Rep. Joyce's office and other folks in the Cannabis Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus. And I think it's so important to make sure that people realize over 70% of Americans think this should be legal, and make sure that as we do that, we're including the right retroactive relief and criminal justice reform measures is going to be important as well.
Yeah.
Well, and I do think that, so this is, what's the difference between hemp and cannabis? It's the same plant, right? The question is whether the plant has been feminized. And isn't that gender discrimination? Right?
True.
So we've got California that's trying to ban the male plants, and Texas is trying to ban the female plants. And, you know, that goes along with, I guess, the political philosophies in both states that are predominant. But I mean, it's a plant. Come on. Right? And what is the difference? And the thing is, if we're not talking about combustible flower products, right? You can get a vape in Texas. You can get a beverage in Texas. You can get a THC edibles in Texas. And they have the same amount of intoxicating THC. It's just you've got to grow 100 times more plants to produce the and so, you know, legalizing cannabis is good for the environment because we use less water to grow more cannabis plants in those states where, you know, currently they only have the hemp-based products. And so, you know, it's great. They're talking about raising the limit from 0.03 to 0.09, but that's not going to matter. No one's going to smoke a 0.09 joint. You're going to have 100 of those to do anything. No, but
that
you're
might
just
be a
going to have
good
to,
baby step for
right?
somebody, though.
Yeah, sure. But, you know, when it comes down to the practical matter, it just means that you'll be growing 1/3, you know, you'll be doing 2/3 fewer plants to get the same amount of THC in those hemp-only states. It's the plant. It's the same plant, whether it's in Texas or Florida or California. It's just whether it's feminized or not.
Are you looking for a lasting, meaningful way to connect with your audience and highlight your brand? Well, listen up, because Planted with Sara Payan is taking on new sponsors. Here's a powerful stat. 20% of listeners are more likely to support brands they hear about on a trusted podcast. And 60% actually look up that product after hearing about it. That's the power of podcasting. Planted with Sara Payan has a unique draw. With remarkable guests, we attract and engage audience that spans all sides of the cannabis spectrum. Picture your message reaching these listeners time and again. Podcast ads are evergreen, meaning your brand stays relevant as new audiences discover and binge past episodes. It's a long-term investment that keeps on giving. If you're looking for a targeted, passionate audience with lasting impact, the right listeners are here waiting to meet your brand. Visit plantedwithsara.com to get a copy of our sponsorship deck today.
Well, and that, I think, is the thing. Like, when we look at hemp and we look at cannabis, and some people want to say it's a different plant. You're right. It's not. And the sheer lobbying power, if we could work together, and if we could look at the Farm Bill and everything that's happening in other states, is not necessarily taking away from cannabis, but like my husband always likes to say, playing chess instead of checkers, looking at it as a case study and how we can successfully have cannabis in areas besides dispensaries. Look at Minnesota. There are beverages available in bars and restaurants. This is showing that we can have alcohol and cannabis in the same room, because people who drink alcohol and people who enjoy cannabis not only are often the same people, but they also hang out. And when we're looking at some of the challenges that we've had with cannabis lounges, it's been because you're not able to hang out with everybody, you know, and not too long ago, we couldn't have music, or, you know, bars are able to have entertainment, comedians, music, food, drinks. We should be able to have all of that. I mean, when I've had parties where alcohol and cannabis have been together, you don't have problems as long as you educate the public. And I think that's one thing that we're really, as far as safe access, we're really missing the boat on, as far as getting into legalization. People started getting lazy, not educating the public, not supporting the patients, and that's where we could possibly have our Tylenol moment.
Well, and I think in the legalization process, whether we're talking about how we did it in California or how how they're doing it in Germany right now, we the cannabis community has probably made too many compromises when we put the ballot measure out for cannabis, because we created a regulatory environment that was so restrictive and that really has tied the hands and made it challenging to be success. Yeah, we had to get that door open of adult use legalization, but now that we're coming up on 10 years, next year of its adoption, you got to wonder whether the things that we were trying to prevent were real. And this is really visible when you look at having a cannabis special event. All right, because there are cannabis events all around California every weekend. There are probably only 6 licensed cannabis special events in the state where everything is above board and it's all legal. And that's because we've just made it so cumbersome and so expensive and so challenging to comply that people just don't comply. And so those special events that do happen, they may, not be able to afford compliance and the ability to continue happening. And that's just a metaphor for everything else. And when I tell people about what we've done in West Hollywood with these beautiful dispensaries and lounges, and then I tell that to someone in Germany and they're like, yes, but we are not allowed to advertise. Well, how are you supposed to do a business if you're not allowed to advertise? You can only have 500 members of your cannabis social club. Well, then that means that no one's going to be able to bring their friends to the cannabis social club, or visitors can't come and experience what you've got here. And so while, yes, compromises will need to be made to get legalization, don't give up too much, because it's, you don't want to tie your hands, because if a cannabis industry fails, people are going to be like, haha, we knew it. And, the opponents will seize on that for all the wrong reasons, right? It wasn't because it was overtaxed and overregulated, but that's really why. Because you buy cannabis in California, you're paying like 30+% in taxes, and that might be going up in a week, or on Monday or Tuesday. And same with gasoline. And it's like buying a gallon. Everyone's like, why is gas more expensive in California? It's like, well, you're paying $2 in taxes on every gallon, right? More than every other state in the country.
Yeah, we may be seeing that going up.
Don't blame Valero, blame the government.
Valero's got the cheapest gas.
Right? But it's the same thing with cannabis. It's like we need, and I think this is where also working across party lines. I think that perhaps an overtaxed and overregulated industry was probably written by people primarily aligned with one political party, and they weren't talking to people across the aisle who might have said, well, yeah, you know what, we really probably shouldn't tax more than 10% on something.
Well, that's what Michael Steele was saying to me. He's like, what we have in common? We'll both agree on the fact that it's been overtaxed. And I was like, absolutely. But I think it's also, a lot of the compromises we had to make was because of the sheer invisibility of cannabis users, because everyone was keeping it on the down low. So we still had a very contrived view of what the average cannabis user was. And so now it's more important than ever for people to say, I contribute to society, I use cannabis, I pay taxes, and I vote, because the people who depend on our votes for their jobs should know what their constituents really want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think getting people out, I see it a lot with what I do at Last Position Project, which is uplifting the stories of some of our constituents. And some folks duly concerned about using their voice and continuing to be out there might not want to, but we're always so grateful when we come across folks that come back out of being inside and going through a traumatic experience because of this plant. And yet they come out excited and resilient, trying to get back into this industry. And so for me, I think it's so important about trying to get some of our legacy operators into the legal market these days, and really trying to solve that loophole and making it just easier. We have too many restrictions. I think even having like a craft cannabis growers association, something that's a smaller batch, things that gives access to everyone and some type of a foothold to create the beginnings of something that, whether you want to keep trying to run with it and keep going with it and have it be your baby all the way through, or if you want to try to do the traditional business model and selling that, you know what I mean? We should be able to be creating more opportunities for the small guy to be able to get into the game.
This episode is brought to you by Fat Nugs Magazine, a global perspective of cannabis and stoner culture as a bridge to the rest of the world. Right now, you can join Fat Nugs Magazine, Beard Bros Farms, Freedom Grow, and Jailed for Weed in the upcoming Prisoners Edition and help spotlight current and past cannabis prisoners and their stories, because no one should be in jail for a plant. Find Fat Nugs Magazine's beautiful print copies at your local dispensary, fatnugsmag.com, and on socials. Cannabis culture welcomes us all. Direct to consumer, I think, is really important too. And going back to our conversation about interstate commerce, because, there will be cultivations throughout the United States, but it's like, being a Michigan girl, I can go to Traverse City, and I would say this, so listeners, bear with me. I can go to Traverse City and drink cherry wine, but I'm probably going to want something from California.
Yeah.
Well, and I do think, and it goes back to the start of our conversation. It's like the parallels between, gay liberation and cannabis legalization. When people think of a cannabis user, it really depends on where you are, what that picture is in your mind. So, in the same way that, like, it was, gay white men were the face of the gay movement, but in fact, there are gay men and women across all races, across all socioeconomic divides, and that's what makes kind of those gay ghettos like West Hollywood and the Castro really a unifying place, because people who would never otherwise talk to each other are all of a sudden meeting in these spaces. Same thing with cannabis lounges in Los Angeles. We've got 8 in LA County, 7 of them here in West Hollywood. And so the people that you see really cross that whole spectrum of the folks in LA County. And I go back to the stereotypical cannabis user, whether you're in California or Texas or Germany, you're going to picture someone else. Someone different. Like in Texas, it's probably going to be a Latino person. In California, it's probably going to be someone from South LA or Compton. If you're in Germany, it's going to be a middle-aged white man.
Wait, where's our fam and the hemp necklaces and the tie-dyes? They're there too.
They're in San Francisco. Right?
and right across the table.
And so your stereotypes of what a cannabis consumer varies from place to place. And the truth is that, cannabis, just like sexual orientation, crosses all racial divides, socioeconomic divides. It really does it has the ability to bring everyone together. And that's why I'm excited that we've got these spaces in West Hollywood, and I look forward to other places, recreating and building on our model, coming here and seeing what it can be. Not just as a business, but as a place to bring people together and start a movement. Because, the gay liberation movement started in the bars of the Castro. It started in, the Black Cat in Silver Lake long before, that thing in New York happened for Stonewall. And similarly with cannabis, it's getting those people together, getting people to see each other, to acknowledge and have those conversations, start those relationships, start talking and have some ideas about.
Wait a minute. No, I'm thinking about the bars and everything. So will we find success when it's the obnoxious bachelorette parties are starting to go through consumption lounges too? Because that's what we've hit it. Because I think that's what we definitely have seen that in the Stro. It's like, ladies, if you come in, behave.
Right. Yeah. Yes, we'll get there. And, having the ability to, see who the other cannabis users in your community are, and then have those conversations on the side about how do we organize? What do we need to do? How do we get this across the finish line at the federal level, and globally? Because, U.S. cannabis is losing so many opportunities. So right now, Canada is the #1 supplier of medical cannabis around the world. They're sending it to Germany, to France, to England, to Israel. Who wants Canadian cannabis? Let's be real.
Well,
right? I want stuff from California.
Remediated or washed Canadian cannabis, because that's some crazy shit.
Thankfully, I haven't been there to try it. And you don't need it. We've got Humboldt, we've got the Emerald Triangle.
We're spoiled.
All of that stuff you can buy down here. You can enjoy it in LA. Enjoy the sun. You can get sun-grown cannabis from up north. Enjoy it in the beautiful sun of Los Angeles, here in West Hollywood. I don't need to go to Canada. But we are missing out on opportunities. And that's where like the oversupply and the black market and all those conversations we're having, that's Canada had those same problems that California's having, where they built too much capacity for growing compared to the amount of demand to purchase it. And they resolved it by exporting it.
Right.
Right.
But still, we're seeing, like when we were in Barcelona this year, how many California products did you see? Because I know I saw a lot.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I call me an idiot. I paid 80 euros for a pre-roll because I thought he had said 18.
Oh,
and I
no.
thought that was a lot. I thought that was a lot. And I didn't want to be the asshole, the horrible American, who caused a scene over it. So I just, shelled out the money. I'm like, I'm never going back to that place again, Terpies.
It's that thing you do when you're on vacation where you spend a little more than you ever expected, but you're like, well, I'm on vacation.
Well, yeah, and especially because in some capacity, I'm in the cannabis world, I'm representing West Hollywood, and I want to I want to be respectful and understanding, and I don't want to be that ugly American,
right?
Especially when we're out representing.
Instead, you were that nice man from West Hollywood who bought the very expensive joint,
and will never come back.
Well, as we wrap up, and I've so enjoyed our conversation today, and we have so much more. Really, this is just the tip of the iceberg with these subjects. But what are some things that you're excited and hopeful for in the future?
Yeah, for me, I'm excited about continuing the work that we're doing at LPP. I'm excited every single day we're able to release someone new, reduce more years off their sentence. We've been able to save over 350 years in the past 5 years of operation from
Bravo.
Folks of serving unjust cannabis sentences. And so I think as we continue this efforts of re-education that we've talked about, I think there are opportunities to continue to push forward and let folks know that we're not done with this activism. Like I said, the Loud and Proud campaign that we're working on, I think does a really great job. Continue to check that out on our Instagram. And I think just making sure that we have uplifting voices that have been impacted, that know what the industry needs, especially those legacy voices, I think is going to be so important. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about continuing to explore the beautiful city of West Hollywood, making sure that our cannabis consumption lounges are safe, that our community feels safe, and that we can continue to meet the needs of folks where they're at, and make these spaces where we can continue to feel joy in these moments of what can sometimes feel despair, especially for our LGBTQ community as we see rights being rolled back across the country. I think it's going to be really important for us to continue that fight and then take a break and smoke a joint at the end of the day as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, make sure people watch that Loud and Proud and experience the queer joy. We're here in LA and in the heart of Los Angeles in Southern California. And next year, the World Cup is coming to Los Angeles a year from now. And 2 years later, we'll have the Olympics. It'll be the first World Cup and Olympics that have legal cannabis. And while the athletes probably won't be consuming, all the fans that are coming, if you are coming for the World Cup or for the Olympics and you're a cannabis user, you can base yourself here in West Hollywood, stay at one of our lovely hotels, find a nice little cabana at the woods. You can even watch it on the TV screens in our lounges. And so we're going to have the opportunity to show the world what legal cannabis can look like as the world comes to LA in the next 3 years. And I'm really excited about those opportunities. And, it's just getting to the cannabis users around the world and letting them know about that. So,
yeah,
that's going to be my challenge the next 3 years. And I look forward to it.
Yeah, come to beautiful West Hollywood. And for the athletes, I hope that when it's all said and done with their competitions, that they're able to kick back and partake if they choose to. So, how do we find you on social media? How do our listeners reach out?
Yeah, so for us, we're just at Last Prisoner Project on most social media platforms. If you have any questions specifically about the work that we're doing, info@lastprisonerproject.org. We'll make sure to be able to direct that to either our legal team, provide those social and legal services that they might need. We're always looking for folks that are incarcerated for cannabis so that we can provide help to them. Looking forward to continuing to spreading the mission.
Yeah, and Emerald Village West Hollywood can be found on Instagram at Emerald Village WeHo. That's also our URL, emeraldvillageweho.com. And on X, we're at EVWeHo.
Thank you so much. And thank you for fighting the good fight. I'm in it with you, and I'm looking forward to our future conversations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Payan on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.